Hello, everyone. My name is Maria Matsakis, and today I will be talking about how we can take lessons from Harry Potter in the year of 2025 into our real world so that we can work together to resist authoritarianism. I want to begin with a very brief story from a book that we all know and love, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, because I believe that it holds a mirror to our present moment in time. In the final installment in the series, Voldemort's regime tightens its control. Laws are rewritten, history is censored or wizard washed, and propaganda and fear fuel division not just between wizards and muggles, but between wizards and themselves. The story doesn't stop at a warning. It also shows how ordinary people can resist through small, coordinated acts of courage. Dumbledore's army, Potterwatch, these are grassroots resistance movements that are built on collective trust and secrecy and shared purpose and bravery. Since he who must not be named returned to office in November of 2024, sweeping executive orders, restrictive education laws, and court rulings have accelerated the erosion of democratic norms in the United States. I argue today that the parallels to Voldemort's regime are not just metaphor. This final book offers both a warning and a blueprint for resistance. And in fandom spaces like ours, we can become our own grassroots organization, networks of people who work to defend truth, resist censorship, and build democratic strength. I'm going to first start by talking about the erosion of some of the democratic norms in the current administration. On his first day back in office, you know who issued a flurry of executive orders that targeted immigration, asylum, and enforcement powers. Analysts have described these as unconstitutional, aggressive, and cruel. Many of the early executive orders seek to extend presidential authority over independent agencies. Effectively, this bends formerly autonomous bodies to executive control. Among the most striking of these, Executive Order 14149, Restoring Freedom of Speech and Ending Federal Censorship, which was signed on January 20th, 2025, is framed as reversing supposed federal censorship. But critics warn that this is a, quote, direct assault on reality, end quote, enabling disinformation under the guise of free speech. Executive Order 14190, ending radical indoctrination in K through 12 schooling, signed January 29th, 2025, prohibits schools from teaching material that is considered anti-American, subversive, or promoting gender ideology, tying education to political policing. Executive Order 14151, signed January 20th, 2025, also demands the termination of DEIA, diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility programs across federal agencies. These moves are not isolated. They are not a mistake. The current administration's strategy has been called a, quote, authoritarian playbook, end quote, in which executive power is consolidated, norms are strategically broken, and countervailing institutions are weakened. In March of 2025, you know who signed an executive order on elections that would shift the powers toward the executive branch, potentially disenfranchising voters and centralizing election control. The Brennan Center for Justice has condemned the administration's moves to meddle with voting machines and sow distrust in election integrity. The courts have now become battlegrounds. The administration has attacked any judge who rules against them, questioned the authority of the judiciary to review executive action, and sought to erode institutional respect for judicial checks. A Supreme Court ruling in mid-2025 significantly limited federal judges' authority to suspend executive orders, which was seen as a boost to you-know-who's ability to act unilaterally. More broadly, the pillars of the United States democracy, freedom of elections, the rule of law, anti-corruption are currently under strain, documented by analysis from Brookings and many other institutions who are studying this. The administration is also pushing to align K through 12 curriculum with a conservative agenda, something I can attest to, removing or restricting content about race, gender, and systemic inequities. There is mass concern about censorship of scientific data, research dissemination, and the suppression of federal science policies. The Union of Concerned Scientists has detailed hundreds of attacks on science in the first half of 2025 alone. Regarding media, CBS canceled The Late Show with Stephen Colbert this year in 2025, shortly after Colbert criticized a settlement between Trump and CBS's parent company, which raised questions about political influence over media decisions. You Know Who has also threatened to revoke broadcast licenses, filed lawsuits against media outlets, and sought to pressure networks to align their coverage to his political agenda. Taken together, these actions illustrate a pattern of weakening democratic guardrails, centralizing authority, censoring dissent, and bending institutions to serve their political ends. This is the erosion of democratic norms that we are witnessing in real time. So let's take this and map it to our primary text, Deathly Hallows. We have law rewriting and consolidation of authority. In Deathly Hallows, the Ministry of Magic is overtaken by Voldemort's forces. New decrees ban unapproved organization. They restrict freedoms, like requiring Muggle-born witches and wizards to register with the government. Clamp down on dissent. In our current presidential administration, executive orders are used to reframe and reverse laws, push out independent voices, and centralize power, going so far as arresting people who are naturally born American citizens or legally American citizens. In the books, the Hogwarts curriculum is also controlled. Muggle studies is abolished, anti-pureblood teachings are removed, and the ministry, under Voldemort's reign, dictates what students can or cannot learn. Similarly, in the real world, the 2025 administration is attempting to restrict curriculum content via Executive Order 14190 and control educational messaging about race, gender, and history, as well as what books students can and cannot read. The regime in the final novel of the series uses the Daily Prophet as propaganda. It's a tool to push misinformation, control narratives, threaten dissenters. And in our era, the administration's executive orders on censorship have been positioned as protecting speech, but in reality are criticized as enabling disinformation. Just as Voldemort's regime silences newspapers or detains dissenters, the cancellation of media programs and legal pressure on outlets echoes that suppression. Voldemort also fosters fear, mistrust, and suspicion among even his own allies. The political environment in 2025 is increasingly polarized with identity-based scapegoating, public distrust in institutions, fear being used as a tool and method of control. These structural similarities are maybe not coincidence, but functionally analogous. A regime that seeks to control education, law, information, and coercion as levers of power. But Deathly Hallows does not leave us hopeless. It offers lessons on how resistance works at the grassroots level. Dumbledore's army begins as small, secret meetings in the Room of Requirement. They train privately, they share tactics and resources, and they support one another. Potterwatch is a clandestine radio broadcast run by ex-Order of the Phoenix military members to share news and counter regime propaganda. This decentralization is crucial. Even if one hub is shut down, others continue. Sorry, I thought I'd turn my mic off. In the real world, grassroots organizing, small local groups, book clubs, newsletters, informal networks of trusts, rather than relying solely on centralized institutions, are the only way that we can survive. The resistance doesn't just fight. It frames its moral purpose. They remind people of the past in the wizarding world, specifically at Hogwarts. They talk of unity. They push back against lies and work to actively spread the truth. Potterwatch counters ministry propaganda with the truth, telling secret stories, elevating voices that are not permitted in regime media. In our world, this looks like Alternative media, independent journalism, fact checking, countering disinformation narratives with a shared moral language. And Dumbledore's army continually brings in new recruits to sustain its momentum. They don't rely on a single hero. They share risks. If one member is in danger, others step up. In the real world, this looks like building networks of people who are committed to participation. Letter writing campaigns, legal observing groups, teacher support groups, alliances across identity lines. The resistance also uses secrecy and secure channels. They work to share information carefully, using hidden rooms and magic coins as trust systems to avoid infiltration. They protect vulnerable voices, operate in parallel, and adjust tactics when lines are compromised. How can we do this? Encrypted communication, small trusted groups, safe spaces for organizing, redundancy plans in case of censorship or suppression. And the resistance knows it's a long game. Voldemort was not defeated in one book. Small setbacks happen. There is fear and betrayal and loss. But the ethos of love and courage and working together to protect the vulnerable drives these groups forward. They resist the normalization of evil. They refuse to accept incremental degradation. In our world, this looks like civic education, moral framing, refusing to acquiesce to degraded norms, sustaining morale and collective purpose over time. How can fandom spaces like this one act as rooms of requirement? Just as Potterwatch circulated truth, fandom channels like our Slack or social media, or maybe even a newsletter, can become hubs for fact checking, explaining real world politics, and sharing resources among trusted comrades. In a moment when media is under pressure, small community networks can keep people informed and alert to mis or disinformation. From within our very fandom, this group of people, we can launch letter writing initiatives to lawmakers. We can coordinate calls to action. We can attend local protests. We can circulate petitions. We can host writing campaigns or fundraisers for civic groups. We can organize a book club that focuses on banned books and share reading of political history texts, open discussion forums about democracy. And this is organizing disguised as community. Many fandoms already prioritize marginalized creators, and we can intentionally elevate voices that have historically been silenced in political spaces: BIPOC, queer, disabled, immigrant communities, through fandom art, fanfic, videos, and ways that we can embed political critique in ways that are accessible and emotionally resonant. The resistance is not political, but emotional. Fandom is a space of joy. It's a shared identity. It's group empathy. In times of fear, these networks are more important than ever and can remind people that they are not alone, can work to rebuild trust, and fuel our courage. So, to close with a call to action, what are concrete actions that we can take today? We can write to representatives to advocate for the protections of academic freedom, transparency, and funding for independent journalism. We can organize a banned book reading club, read texts that have been challenged or removed in local school curriculum, share reflections, invite people who know more than us to have a public discussion. We can launch a fandom newsletter, collect political analysis, personal stories, real-world action resources, and distribute that amongst fans. We can support independent media by subscribing, sharing, and donating, highlighting stories that are often ignored by mainstream press. We can host teach-ins or discussion panels other than just this once-a-year meeting within our fandom, invite historians, civic educators, and other organizers to come and speak. We can create inclusive fan works, stories, art, memes that work to challenge the oppressive narratives in our world. We can reimagine justice, resistance, empathy. We can serve as legal observers or volunteers in protests or civic groups, especially in communities where democratic erosion is the most acute. And we can build networks of accountability using this conference as a diving board. to create small group check-ins, to strategize, to work together to protect our mental health. This fiction reminds us that salvation doesn't come from one chosen one. It comes from many ordinary people who repeatedly choose to act in defense of courage, truth, and love. Fandom spaces, with our shared emotional investment and creative energy, are uniquely poised to be nodes of resistance. We can transform nostalgia and critique into action, harness our shared identity for civic purpose. If our Slack group or this conference act as rooms of requirement, let us be one that provides shelter from despair, tools for organization, platforms for marginalized voices, and shared moral language and narratives so that we can fight back against our oppression. Let us form our own Dumbledore's army, not of words and spells, but pens, voices, networks, love. Let us resist authoritarianism, not just as passerbys, but as committed participants. Let us work together to build a future where darkness does not hold dominion, because we, collectively, have refused to stand quietly by. Thank you for watching.